And welcome back to Sunday Agenda. I'm Joe Pinion. Well, a grand jury indicts former FBI Director James Comey for a second time in connection with his 2025 Instagram post showing seashells arranged as 8647. Prosecutors allege the post could be interpreted as a threat against President Trump's life. Now, this type of messaging is the opposite of his stance against corruption that he stood for in office. So for more on this, let's bring in former FBI agent and author of Sheep No More, Jonathan Gilliam, criminal defense attorney Ken Belkin, and also with us, former Trump spokesperson Liz Harrington. I'll start with you, Liz, right? The acting attorney general was on Meet the Press this morning and was asked about the indictment against Comey. Take a listen. I want to get your feedback.
The career assistant United States attorneys in North Carolina, the career FBI agents, the career Secret Service agents that investigated this case didn't just look at the Instagram post and walk away. That's why you saw an indictment last week, notwithstanding the fact that it was last May that the post was made. So I am not permitted to get into the details of what the grand jury heard or found, as you know, but rest assured that it's not just the Instagram post that leads somebody to get indicted.
So, yeah, look, James Comey has been very vocal. His criticism of President Trump is well documented, but it's also well documented that James Comey has been talking about rhetoric, particularly as it relates to President Trump. Perhaps he doesn't think it applies to him. Liz, what say you?
Well, of course not, right? And this is a guy, he claims to be a Swiftie, right? He knows the pop culture, and yet he doesn't know what 86 means. Give me a break. I mean, nobody is buying this, and I think that's kind of key when you heard Blanche say there. Perhaps what they're really going after here is maybe he lied to federal agents when he talked about this, and that would be poetic justice, considering how many people during Russiagate that his FBI entrapped to try to bring charges of making false statements to the FBI. So look, this is a long time coming. I hope there's more when it comes to the Russiagate conspiracy, and I hope there's charges against that. But this should absolutely be looked at when you have a threat, right, and you've already seen now 3 assassination attempts.
You know, Ken, to that point, right, it's people have to remember, this is a man that put Martha Stewart behind bars for high crimes against society, not because of the insider trading that he couldn't prove, but because she lied to the FBI. So, again, a former assistant attorney general for the nation, who has, again, had this track record where he has been above reproach. Contemporaneous notes became the words on everyone's lips as it related to President Trump and James Comey, my word is stronger than oath. And now we find ourselves here with him trying to pretend he had no idea what this meant, and he just happened to come across it on the beach.
Yeah, well, I think it's very telling that the acting attorney general went on Meet the Press and said it's not just about this Instagram post. There are other things that were presented to the grand jury that led them to vote to indict Mr. Comey. So I think that is good, because I think that Instagram post on its face alone is not sufficient enough to support charging him. But if there is other evidence, I'd like to see what it is. I would also like to see Comey re-indicted for lying to Congress. Let's not forget that that indictment that was dismissed against him, it wasn't dismissed on the merits. It was dismissed on an issue of how the prosecutor was appointed in the case. He may still very well be guilty of those crimes as well.
You know, Jonathan, you look at all of this in its totality. You have a president that at the time of this Instagram post had a murder for hire plot by the Iranians that the Department of Justice was investigating, right? You got a president who had a crazy man on a slanted roof in Butler, Pennsylvania, attempt to take his life and was nearly successful. And yet now you have the FBI director, a former FBI director, who says that he doesn't know what 8647 means, said he didn't actually put 2 and 2 together. You had Christopher Wray, who went to Congress and said that perhaps President Trump might have been hit by shrapnel. You have what happened at the Correspondents' Dinner, which appears to be another lapse in security. So the American people start to ask, is all of this a little bit too much failure by design when people's negative attitudes towards the president results in lax activities that undermine the stability of our nation?
You know, two things you said there that are very important for people to realize. One is the totality of the circumstances. Everybody knows me, knows I love to use that phrase because it's very important. But also that you said that it looks like failure, intended failure, or failure on purpose. Well, that is not failure at all. That's intention. And so when we look at those two things with Comey, we look at criminal behavior, the totality of his behavior leading up to those seashells. His intent had been to get the president put in jail, to build a case filled with lies, and consistently go after and target the president for all of these things that were made up under his tenure as the FBI director, right, and knowingly doing it. So when he shows, if they can show that he knowingly did a lot of these things, and I think they do have the evidence for that now, and then they show him do this, they may actually have evidence that shows he intended to motivate people to kill the president.
I mean, it's just wild to think of. Again, James Comey, the man who, again, like George Washington, could never tell a lie. I think the fact that he can't even tell the truth about these seashells sounds crazy, makes you question everything he has ever said, particularly as it relates to President Trump. And I have to leave it there.
He would have cut
Jonathan,
down that cherry tree and blamed Trump. That's what he would have done.
Oh, my goodness. Jonathan, Ken, Liz, God bless you all. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you again soon.